When people think about military asbestos exposure, they usually think of the Navy because the material was used so heavily to protect the military's ships. But Army veterans faced significant asbestos exposure too, in barracks, maintenance facilities, vehicle repair shops, and through their work with asbestos-containing equipment. Thousands of Army veterans have already been diagnosed with mesothelioma, while others are still at risk from exposure that happened decades ago. Today, I want to explain exactly how and where Army veterans were exposed to asbestos. I'm Terri Oppenheimer, and I've been writing about mesothelioma and asbestos for the website mesothelioma.net for over a decade. The more veterans understand about Army asbestos exposure, the better they'll be able to watch out for symptoms, get diagnosed quickly, and document their service-connected exposure for VA benefits and for legal claims. Let's start with why Army bases had so much asbestos present. Military construction from the 1940s through the 1970s used asbestos extensively for the same reasons that civilian construction did: fire resistance, heat resistance, strength, durability, and low cost. Army bases had thousands of buildings: barracks, mess halls, administrative buildings, hangars, warehouses, motor pools, and maintenance facilities, and most of them contained asbestos. The military also had the addition of fire protection needs: ammunition storage facilities, vehicle maintenance areas, all possessed fire risks, and so they were heavily treated with asbestos fireproofing. Military vehicles and aircraft and equipment contained asbestos components too. Where specifically were Army veterans exposed on base? Older barrack buildings, particularly those built before or during World War II, the Korean War era, and through the 1960s, contained asbestos in ceiling tiles, floor tiles, insulation on steam pipes for heating systems, fireproofing materials, and roofing materials. Before I go on with these details, I'm going to take a break and ask you a quick favor. If you find these videos helpful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. It makes it easier for other people who need this information to find us. Also, if you have questions or there's a topic you'd like to see addressed in a future video, send me a note in the comment section. And make sure you watch until the end, because I'm going to give you valuable information on where to find resources that will make a real difference for you. Now, soldiers living in Army barracks were exposed daily to deteriorating asbestos materials. As buildings aged and materials broke down, asbestos fibers became airborne. This was chronic, low-level exposure over months or years of living on base. Motor pools and vehicle maintenance facilities were particularly high-risk locations for Army mechanics who worked on trucks, jeeps, and armored vehicles that contained asbestos brake linings, clutch assemblies with asbestos components, gaskets and seals made with asbestos, as well as vehicle insulation and fireproofing. Brake work was especially hazardous. Mechanics would blow out brake drums with compressed air, releasing clouds of asbestos dust. Grinding brake shoes generated asbestos fibers. This work was done repeatedly, day after day, without adequate respiratory protection or knowledge of the hazard. Army mechanics who served in motor pools from the 1950s through the 1980s had massive cumulative asbestos exposure from vehicle maintenance work. Aviation maintenance created similar exposure. Army aircraft mechanics worked on fixed-wing aircraft that contained asbestos in brake assemblies, engine compartment insulation, heat shields, gaskets and seals, and fireproofing materials in various aircraft systems. While the engines of Vietnam-era helicopters generated intense heat that required extensive shielding, putting helicopter mechanics at significant risk. Construction and engineering units faced heavy exposure. Army engineers, combat engineers, and construction battalions built and maintained base facilities. These soldiers worked with asbestos-containing building materials directly, installing insulation, working with asbestos cement products, applying asbestos fireproofing, and removing old asbestos materials during demolition or renovations. Engineers in the field may also have been exposed to asbestos in temporary structures, fortifications, and field facilities that used asbestos materials. In combat zones, asbestos exposure could occur through work on damaged buildings, exposure to asbestos in foreign structures, and field maintenance of equipment under primitive conditions with no safety measures. Specific high-risk Army occupations, they include motor transport operators and mechanics who maintained wheeled vehicles, track vehicle mechanics who worked on tanks and armored personnel carriers, aircraft mechanics and crew chiefs across various aviation jobs, combat engineers and construction engineers, heating and air conditioning specialists who worked on HVAC systems in buildings, and plumbers and pipe fitters who worked with asbestos pipe insulation. But exposure wasn't limited to these occupations. Soldiers in administrative jobs worked in buildings contaminated with asbestos. Support personnel used facilities containing asbestos, and training facilities where soldiers went through basic training and advanced training had asbestos in buildings and on firing ranges. The list of Army bases that presented risks is nearly endless because asbestos was ubiquitous in military construction. If you served on any Army base before 1980, you were likely exposed to asbestos to some degree, and this includes overseas bases. Germany, where large numbers of U.S. troops were stationed during the Cold War, on bases in Korea from the Korean War through the present day, and on bases in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. Foreign facilities could even have had more asbestos than U.S. bases because they were often established around older buildings that had been repurposed for military use or constructed with local materials that had high asbestos content. Veterans who served in combat zones faced unique exposure scenarios. Vietnam vets might have been exposed to asbestos in fire-based construction, the maintenance of vehicles and aircraft in field conditions, and the occupation of abandoned or damaged structures that released asbestos when destroyed. Gulf War veterans could have been exposed to asbestos in facilities in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq, some of which were damaged during combat. Afghanistan and Iraq War veterans faced exposure in older buildings damaged during operations, burn pits that might have burned asbestos materials, and maintenance of vehicles under field conditions. So, what should Army veterans diagnosed with mesothelioma or any other asbestos-related disease do to document exposure for VA benefits and legal claims? Write down everything you remember about your service history, including bases where you were stationed, your military occupational specialty, the units you served with, and your years of service. Describe your specific job duties, especially work with vehicles, aircraft, buildings, or equipment. If you remember working directly with products that you now know contained asbestos, like brake linings, gaskets, or insulation, document that too. You should also contact former unit members who might remember working conditions and can provide you with supporting statements. Many veteran organizations have locator services, and service records from the National Personnel Records Center can provide official documentation of your duty stations and your MOS. For VA disability claims, you're going to need to show service-connected asbestos exposure, a current diagnosis of mesothelioma or any other asbestos-related disease, and a medical opinion that links your diagnosis to your military service. The VA has recognized that exposure occurred on military bases, so you don't need to prove specific products. just that you served on bases during the relevant time period and had exposure through your duties. For legal claims against asbestos manufacturers, experienced mesothelioma attorneys have databases of which products were used in Army vehicles, equipment, and facilities. They can help you identify specific manufacturers whose products you were exposed to, even if you don't remember the product names. To review, Army veterans were exposed to asbestos in barracks, motor pools, maintenance facilities, aviation facilities, and through construction work on bases. High-risk occupations included vehicle mechanics, aircraft mechanics, engineers, and those in the construction trades. Exposure occurred at virtually every Army base operating from the 1940s through the 1980s, both domestic and overseas. So affected veterans should document their service history, military occupation specialty, duty stations, and specific exposure for both VA benefits and legal claims. Visit mesothelioma.net for more information about Army asbestos exposure and veterans benefits, or call 1-800-692-8608 or use the live chat feature on our website to work with somebody right away. As for me, remember to post your questions below, and I'll see you next time.